Now, Sports Talk with Brodes. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Sports Talk with Brodes. I think it's time to check in on the Eagles. It's been a couple weeks of silence for me when it comes to the Bird Gang, and that's because they annoyed me and bothered me for so long. It was only right for me to get away. I needed that mental escape. Sadly, though, while I was getting away from this squad, I was watching the Flyers. That's just as brutal, no doubt about it. But here we go. It's time to check in, and I want to discuss multiple different topics when it comes to this organization right now. When it comes to what they did at safety to this point, the Joe Flacco signing, Nick Sirianni press conference with Howie Roseman, and of course a little bit of the draft. So why don't we begin at the safety position? And they bring in a guy like Anthony Harris, and I think that is a phenomenal signing. You get him on a one-year deal worth $5 million, and when you look at that position, there's a lot of question marks still there, right? So filling one hole is fantastic, but there are still question marks on exactly what you are going to have. So yeah, Rodney McLeod is going to be a player on this team, but what type of version are you going to get of him? When exactly are you going to get him? When is he going to be able to, take that next step in terms of coming back from such a big injury? You don't know exactly what Rodney McLeod is going to return as. You lose Jalen Mills. You don't have a player like Rudy Ford. Not that Rudy Ford was some magnificent player by any stretch of the imagination, but what he did was he provided a big role on special teams, something that you need to fill. Now, if you have a complete roster and you're just looking for that Rudy Ford, yeah, big difference than having 3,000 holes and then, hey, let's fill the special teams role on top of that. It only makes it more difficult for the decision makers upstairs. And to be fair, one of the reasons why you're even in this mess is because of them to begin with. So start the fire. You better make sure the fire goes out too. And guess what? The clock's ticking here. There ain't that much time left, Howie. All right? Lori, I hope you're listening. Howie better not have that much time left to play around with things, to toy with things, but it's pretty damn clear he's at least going to have a little bit more time. There's a little time left on the clock, and I pray, please tell me there's not a lot of time left on the clock. And just to tell everyone where I stand with Howie Roseman is this, because I do think that there's this overreaction that he sucks forever and he's always been bad and he's never done anything good in his entire career. That's the vibe surrounding Howie Roseman, and that's not the case. But I'll relay this message. There was a time when Andy Reid was done here. Doesn't mean he's a bad coach. It just means that his time here in Philadelphia is over, and there needs to be this new, fresh identity. That's where Howie Roseman is for me. He's where Andy Reid was. You know what? It was ugly towards the end, Andy Reid. It was time. It was over. Let's move on to the next guy. That doesn't mean that Howie Roseman is a garbage general manager who knows nothing, because if you ask everyone around the NFL, all these polls every single year, and the people voting on these polls are the people involved in the same exact job as Howie Roseman. They all look at him as one of the top tier GMs in all of football. I might not love that. You might not love that. We're so emotionally tied to it, but it's a reality of this situation. So I know that we feel it is time to get rid of him, and it is. It's starting to get to that time, but it doesn't mean that he is a nobody and he's done nothing whatsoever. I hate the fact that this personality side of things, I didn't even bring up Jeff McLean's article, and I have the whole damn thing printed out right next to me. It's like 18 pages of when he's screaming at Lane Johnson and he's getting involved in that area. Hell, whoa, what are we doing here? Why are we going to the extreme? There's no reason in hell that Howie Roseman should be that involved and be invested with things of that nature where there's conflict internally banging heads with the GM. GM should be out of sight, out of mind. And when you talk about all these old Eagles that have been speaking publicly about where the Eagles are now, they were talking about Joe Banner and how you would barely see him, and it's not like you're having that many conversations with the GM. The locker room was, the way that Andy Reid had, the locker room was for the players. It's for the players. They go in there, they get to be themselves, they get to be their team. That's how they create what they're going to be, the leaders in the locker room. All that happens internally. Allow the players to do their thing. It seems there's this dynamic of Howie Roseman walking around, sneaking around, listening in, being a little bit sneaky and shy, and Not shy, sly. Sly. Being sly about things, all of that. Oh, come on. That's a bad culture. And there's a common theme. This is the problem I have with Howie Roseman the most, outside of drafting. He does other things well. Drafting is clearly poor. But one of the... And to be fair, we don't know how much Jeffrey Lurie's involved. And that's another thing that bothers me, too, is I just don't know. And I'm so upset that I don't know. We should be able to know what the GM is doing. We should be able to know who is making the decisions. The fact that, well, did he do this and did he do that? Was that Lurie, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, DK Metcalf? Well, he had the medical problem. And we need to know. Let us know so then the proper people can be held accountable. But when it goes back to... with Howie Roseman, there is this dynamic to him where people despise him and absolutely hate him around football too. And that's a problem. You shouldn't be just terribly hated by so many, whether it's ex-players, current players, people that used to be involved in the front office, and not everyone's going to love you, but when there's enough people that come out and like look sideways at Howie Roseman when it comes to lying and being all sorts of sneaky, okay, now no matter what happens with contracts and pushing back contracts and all of that, no matter what he does with the cap and the way he manipulates money, if you're not a people person as a GM and if you can't communicate with players and all, well, you're going to have a big problem. That's a huge part of the job. Imagine being a manager and then not being good at communicating. That's a joke. You got to be able to be good at that. That's a big part of the job. Drafting, cap space, manipulating contracts, giving out contracts, understanding player evaluation, all that matters, and so does speaking, dialogue, being a good person. You want the people to fight for you. Why was Doug Peterson a successful head coach? It's pretty damn simple. The fellas loved him. He wasn't the smartest. He wasn't the best X's and O's guys, but he had everyone ready to run through a damn brick wall for him. All right? He had the boys going. He had that locker room cruising with energy, buzzing. Why? Because he's a good people person. They respect him. They don't respect Howie Roseman. You got to have some sort of respect from your players, from your culture, from your organization. If people aren't respecting up top, guys, well, guess what? You're in trouble. And I think it's intensified. And that's the problem. I don't think it was to this degree all the time. But now it's starting to become more of a narrative behind Howie Roseman where maybe his head got a little big, you win a championship, you win a Super Bowl, now you think you're better than you really are, right? Your head gets big, you think you're tough, essentially, and then things backfire as well. So, that's how I feel on Howie Roseman. I know we started out with Anthony Harris, and somehow we went all over the place. But I'm excited I saw the video with Anthony Harris, and he was getting dapped up by Jonathan Gannon, and Jonathan Gannon's face lit up of excitement, right? He's so stoked. He's dapping guys up. That's such a big storyline that I feel isn't getting recognized enough right now. And I get why, because who gets all woohoo about a defensive coordinator when your head coach, well, first off, when the juice surrounding this team is as low as it is, but it's fascinating. There's no doubt about it. But with Jonathan Gannon, I'm stoked to see this new defense. I was a Jim Schwartzman. Everyone knew that because every game, Brodes, you're an idiot. Brodes, you're an idiot. Brodes, you're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. Because Jim Schwartz is a fantastic defensive coordinator, and he had flaws, but statistically, he had you right where you need to be. And look, when you have slop talent, you can't be the same person that says Jim Schwartz sucks and blows and Howie Roseman put together the worst roster in the history of sports and put together a trash roster. You can't expect a defensive coordinator. You can make the argument that with the slop that he was handed, Jim Schwartz actually overachieved, believe it or not. So don't go throwing to me that his last couple of years were what they were. Let's use context, right? You got to do second-level thinking. You got to dive a bit deeper when that's the case. So now let's apply that to just his whole tenure here in Philadelphia. Jim Schwartz, he was the scapegoat for so long, which is an embarrassment. We should be able to recognize what he was able to do for this city and with this team, with this roster. But anyway, we're moving along here, and we're moving forward with this new generation of defense. Jonathan Gannon was on lists of other teams as well. That makes me feel comfortable. Although, guess who was on other lists as well that sucked Well, his name happens to be Adam Gase. His name happens to be Ben McAdoo. So that's why with Nick Sirianni, well, no one wanted Nick Sirianni. Okay, everyone wanted Adam Gase and Ben McAdoo that year. No one wanted Doug Peterson, and even though Doug Peterson had flaws towards the end, it was the better pick of all of them, and you won a damn championship. You won the Lombardi Trophy. And with Andy Reid, nobody wanted Andy Reid. You got him. So that doesn't necessarily always result in, well, because guys wanted him, that means he becomes a stud without a doubt. That's not the case, but I am excited to see this new era of football. You're seeing pre-snap disguises more, and hey, maybe more turnovers. Believe it or not, secondary pieces can catch the football, so I'm excited to see if we're going to get any sort of interceptions from these secondary pieces. And you still need to find out what's going to happen opposite of Darius Slay. That's still a problem. And you still have holes for sure. But, yeah, with Anthony Harris, that's the start of something solid in that secondary. He had a great year a couple years ago. When the Minnesota Vikings had more front pressure, he had a stellar season. When they lacked in that area, not so much. And I don't know if I expect him to be that type of ball hawk he was a couple years ago, but it's still a nice signing, one-year deal, not a lot of pressure on the contract, but he is a guy that can play, and he has a relationship with Jonathan Gannon as well. And I was talking to Adam Kaplan on 97.5 The Fanatic when I hosted over the weekend, and he was saying, yeah, there's going to be some more ties. Be prepared for some more ties with Jonathan Gannon maybe when it comes to some of these pieces that get plucked up along the way here. So just an interesting dynamic, and the reason why I'm excited for Jonathan Gannon is just to see the scheme part of things. I'm in the minority. I don't think this team is going to be as much of a joke as everybody else. Now, I don't think they're good. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. But people think that they're going to win 2 or 3 wins for the next 5 years. There were 3 problems with this football team. Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz, the offensive line getting abused with injuries. Those were the 3 main issues for me last year. Well, Doug Peterson's no longer here. Enter Nick Sirianni. What's Nick Sirianni? I don't know. But I know Doug Peterson, one of the biggest problems last year, is no longer here. Carson Wentz, one of the worst quarterbacks in all of football last year, no longer here. We would all imagine that we're getting better quarterback play as a whole. Even if it's Joe Flacco getting in there, you might actually have better quarterback play than Carson Wentz last year. Although all the reasons why I think Carson Wentz struggled is because of all these reasons snowballed. And then the offensive line was just so putrid, and every single game you had a different guy. So as long as that's out, and that's a big if. If I'm going to rip Howie for putting a lot of money into Deshaun and putting a lot of money into Alshon at that age of their career, I think it's fine to question Lane Johnson coming back from an injury and Brandon Brooks coming back from an injury and wondering, well, are they going to stay healthy or not? It's the same similar conversation we're having. Older players putting a lot of, asking for a lot out of them, for sure. With all that, it's big that you're getting those 3 problems. The question's asked, if that's fixed, do you get a different outcome? And I just feel that it's possible. Now, it's possible to have a bad season next year. I'm talking more of the 5-year window. I don't think it's going to be as much of a disaster as everyone thinks it will be for the next 3, 4, 5 years. The football team won, 2016? They won 7 football games, and the next season they won a championship. So, yeah, you could turn it around and flip it around rather quickly in this league, especially when you have more cap space and when you have more draft picks. You got to hit on those draft picks, no doubt, and get younger talent, and you got to be able to improve in that area. Younger, cheaper talent that can go out and legitimately play, not just be a role player. So that's a huge part of the equation. But I think you can win 5, 6 games and be impressed with maybe the scheme of Nick Sirianni. Be impressed with the way he utilizes a player like Jalen Reagor or Dallas Goedert or Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase, Miles Sanders. You can like what you're seeing out of a scheme standpoint and then leave optimistic, knowing the roster's not going to be great. We know the roster's flawed heading into this season because of cap space problems and because of lack of young, cheap talent. So I think it's fair for 1 year or so to say, you know what, it might not be the best year win total-wise, but it's not about win total. It's about what do you see. So with Jonathan Gannon, he might not have the best personnel to run something amazing, but what he can do is he can show us and provide us that he has a system that with proper personnel could be an X factor and can help this team win a lot of football games. And then as cap space opens up, that would allow this organization to go out and apply that mindset of, hey, let's fill the roles that Jonathan Gannon needs now that we have more cap space, now that we can maybe look in the draft and target a cornerback in another round if you don't go out and get Surtain in the first round. So I just think this year it is somewhat of a wash to learn what you have. But it's not about win total for me. You can win. I think they're a 5-win type of team. 5, 6 wins. They're not 3, 4, 5, 6 wins or so. And it's going to be a 4th place schedule. And you might leave optimistic. Like, that's honestly how I feel. You leave optimistic with Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon that the following year you won't feel as bad. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's impossible for it to be terrible, because it is possible. I don't know what to expect out of Nick Sirianni. I also feel that no one's giving it enough credit that maybe it's okay. I think it's 50-50. It can go wrong, but no one's thinking that it can go right. Everyone's so negative. And they say, well, look at the track record of what you've seen lately. Yeah, the track record hasn't been great lately. I do know that the past 20 years, though, has been good, and that's a bigger sample size. That's a larger sample size. Now, if you take out the Andy Reid era, it's been Chip Kelly, which turned into a nightmare because the guy can't handle the personalities, and he was bad at communicating. And then you had Doug Peterson, who won you a Super Bowl, but the way that it ended was not realistically positive whatsoever. And now you're on Nick Sirianni. So the last few have been a little bit wonky for sure, but this organization is on a run of sustained success. So I'm buying into just, I've seen this organization operate. And I'm also saying that whether you like it or not, this fan base tends to overreact a lot too, because they're so passionate, because they care so much, that automatically everything's falling and there's no way to get out of it. There's no way that this team's going to get back on track. Yes, there is. You're the same person that once claimed Howie's season was a thing for a whole entire year. So you go from Howie Roseman's season to this guy's the worst GM ever invented in human mankind. How does that work? I just don't see how that works. Once again, I'm cool with moving on from Howie Roseman. I just think that it's one extreme to the next. And talking about the what ifs, the scheme side of things and the proper personnel. How about Nick Sirianni with that passion, talking about his brother? Oh, I want to brag about my brother. Oh, my brother, this and that, my brother. And as much as I don't give a damn about your brother and what he does in high school football, let me take a sip of this coffee, by the way. I've been staring at it. I've been smelling it. I can see the steam come up the cup, and I want to just take a fat swig as it goes through my nostril. So hold on one sec. So good. So good. Where was I? I knew that was going to happen. Oh, Nick Sirianni and his brother. As much as I don't give a damn about that, there is this goofy, and it's very nerdy, it's very nipple-ish. Like, I call people nipples. You're a nipple if you're kind of a nerd. You're a square, right? That's a good way to describe it. If you're a square, you kind of, you're a nipple. And there's so many different sizes, shapes, sizes. There's all different kinds of nipples, right? So you can use the word nipple and apply that to describe different people, and it doesn't necessarily mean the same nipple. But I see Nick Sirianni kind of as a nipple. He's a nipple, but that passion I don't think is fake. When he gets all riled up and he gets all going, he's talking about 12 personnel, fullback, my brother, this and that. I think he genuinely, truly does get excited. I don't think it's fake. He puts it out there, and that's him naturally talking about the sport. Look, you hear him talk about this young, great talent that Howie Roseman got us, and everyone started freaking out about that. He's just giving you coach speak. What's he going to say? Oh, yeah, you know what I hate? I hate Howie Roseman's roster to this point. People are diving way too heavily involved in what he was saying, and I was more worried about the approach and the way that he sounded, because the first time it was a disaster, and I'm not going to say this time was much better. There was a little bit of more comfortableness involved. I think I saw him settle in just a little bit more than the other time. The bar wasn't set very high, let's be honest with ourselves, but there was a little bit more of being comfortable involved, and I'm just so fascinated by this dynamic of the coaching staff having no real, true professional to hold your hat on, except for Stoutland. I guess your offensive line coach is the guy to really, truly believe in from a veteran standpoint. And I'm also intrigued by the quarterback coach with Jalen Hurts and what's going on there. So it's just crazy that we are here today talking about this, but there's so much happening that I'm so intrigued. And now it's like my frustration is calming down a bit, and I kind of hit the reset button myself this last week or two of not thinking about the Eagles, kind of hit the reset, and I understand this Joe Flacco thing is a little bonkers, and if you're questioning what this organization is doing, this is something that would almost defend your feelings on this being a nightmare spot for this franchise that constantly makes bad decisions over and over again as of late. The contract on Joe Flacco is a little concerning. Going from what he made last year, $1.5 million, losing all of his starts. He was bad. Joe Flacco was a bad quarterback last year. There are some that feel optimistic because maybe there was that neck injury that played a role. And who's to say that something couldn't linger in the neck? But I also know that he stinks. I also know that he's mid-30s. He's not a starter anymore. And he's not some great leader. He's not a Josh McCown, I should say. No, leader's the wrong word. Teammate is the word I was looking for. He's not a Josh McCown where he will happily walk into that room and almost be a coach. Joe Flacco has a little bit of an attitude with that, a little bit of an edge when it comes to Lamar Jackson, when it comes to Sam Darnold. He wants to play. He looks at himself as a guy who wants to play more so than, hey, I want to teach Jalen Hurts. And there's a part of me that likes that because that keeps that competitive balance there. Look, he wants to play. He looks at himself as a guy who can fucking play. But you can't. And that's the difference. I hate that this organization's mindset now is we don't want to have any sort of quarterback controversy, so let's bring in someone that won't have that. Oh, okay, because last year we shouldn't have thought about that. It's so flawed that now you flip-flop all of a sudden when we were all screaming at the time of the draft. Do you not recognize what you're doing? Hey, jerk-offs, do you not see? Right? Like, that's insane to me that now all of a sudden it's completely different. But this organization, this shouldn't surprise you because this organization values the backup quarterback. Nick Foles, Chase Daniel, Vince Young, Josh McCown, that's what they do. And how about this stat that I heard from Zach Berman of The Athletic? I read their piece on the Joe Flacco signing, and it says that they started a backup in all but 2 playoff games since 2008, and they used a backup in the last 8 playoff games. That's important to know. Really, I mean, that just shows you there's a reason why this organization puts that much stock into the backup quarterback. And I'm okay with that. I don't think it's reasonable, though, to sign $3.5 million guaranteed with incentives up to $4 million. Can't we recognize that there's a little bit of a disconnect here when it comes to market value? I believe San Francisco was another team that was a little bit interested in Joe Flacco but wasn't willing to go to that number. How do you see the production go extremely downhill, yet give this guy a bigger contract? It makes no sense at all. It's a flawed philosophy. Now, at the end of the day, do I think that this is going to be a huge difference in where this team goes? The couple extra $1 million that they signed Joe Flacco with that was guaranteed? No, not really. Not really. They have so many holes and they need some rotational pieces. Could they have applied that money elsewhere to pick up another player here and there to help out with some sort of depth? Yeah, they probably could have. Game-changing players. Is this going to make the difference in game-changing players? No. You're going to be screwed. The problem I have is if Joe Flacco has to play, you're screwed, right? You're not winning many football games. You're in a bad spot, and it's going to be a mess. For some reason, the Eagles won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback, so it feels that that is like the way. No, 99% of the time, you go to your backup quarterback, you suck. You're bad. You're losing football games. There's the minority, and there's some teams that are set up for success more than others where, hey, they have so many studs that if you got to go to Taysom Hill or whatever and you don't have Drew Brees for a handful of games, you might be able to hold your own. But majority of the time, you are going to fail. There's a reason why that is. It's because there's only so many quarterbacks that play at such a crazy level that can be the pure real difference in this league. So my point is, signing Joe Flacco to lose football games at 3.5 with the possibility of making $4 million in incentives, you'd lose those same. You'd have the same chance of winning if you went out and picked up a Geno Smith, somebody out, like any player like that. You'd have the same one. You'd have the same chance. A player that I would feel different about, maybe a Ryan Fitzmagic, if you wanted to go out and sign a Fitzmagic, but I think that opens up the door more for quarterback controversy. And did they not want that? It's crazy that now they don't want that. But earlier last season, I guess they weren't fully aware. Was that the wake-up moment? Did they really need that to happen? They needed this disaster to happen to show you or to show themselves that this is probably not the best road moving forward. It's crazy if that's the case. Now, let me get my DraftKings read over here. Here it is. Forgot to put it out in front of me. The tournament is in full swing, and the action hasn't disappointed. There's been so many upsets. Oral Roberts, Loyola of Chicago is balling. Their defense is insane. Illinois went down, right? So there's so much going on in this tournament. The upsets have been tremendous. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting new customers in the center of the action. Bet $1 on any tournament game, and if your team wins, you win $100. It's that simple. Turning $1 into $100 is 100 to 1 odds. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app right now and use promo code Brodes when you sign up to turn $1 into $100 if the college basketball team of your choosing pulls off the win. That's code Brodes to turn $1 into $100 for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. In partnership with Meadows Racetrack and Casino. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And before we kind of clean things up a bit and close things out, I do want to touch on the draft just briefly. Obviously, as the draft moves closer and closer and inches its way forward here, we will dissect more about what's going to happen. But I got asked a lot, hey, Brodes, what are you thinking? What do you want? I want Pitts. I don't want Pitts. There's a lot that don't, and I think it's the fear of the hype. There always is a player. It's normally a quarterback, and I'm sure it's going to be a quarterback as well, that rises on the draft boards as the draft gets closer. And for some reason, it's not for some reason. I mean, I think his explosiveness, his times, his tape speaks for itself, but Kyle Pitts is that player that is becoming unbelievable. And everyone's afraid because of Evan Ingram. Everyone's afraid because of Hawkinson. But my point is, they don't really apply. And knowing how, like, for example, that's like saying, I don't want to take a wide receiver in the second round because J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was bad. One team valued J.J. Arcega-Whiteside more than the others. They selected him, and he stunk. Does that mean anyone who is projected in the second round now at wide receiver is going to go through the same exact path as J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. In the draft, one player doesn't relate to another player just because of the position. That's like saying, well, the quarterback last year stunk, so I can't draft a quarterback top 5. No, they don't relate at all. Joe Burrow doesn't relate to Justin Fields, who doesn't relate to Trevor Lawrence, who doesn't relate to Carson Wentz, who doesn't relate to Jared Goff. So because Ingram or Hawkinson sit one way with you, it doesn't mean Pitts is going to. Now, it doesn't mean that Pitts is going to be great either. There's a chance that maybe he isn't as powerful. But there's something to be said about the way this league is trending with the tight end, how powerful they are, how explosive they are, how game-changing they are, how important they are to the offenses where you can do so much. And he's not just a tight end. That's the thing everyone says, all the professional tape study people who follow the NFL at a high level and they really dive deep into it. This guy can do it all. You can line him up in so many different areas. I get asked all the time, Brodes, what do you want to do? All right, it's between, like, there's 4 options that I would be okay with. Pitts, Chase, Smith, Surtain. Those are the 4 that I would be okay with. Now, what about Sewell, the offensive lineman? I get why they would go after Sewell if Sewell was there. It's not, I think you can get away with your offensive line right now where you need holes to be filled in other areas. You need another offensive weapon. You need a young defensive player to build around. So you would have to, you'd be using something that, I'm not going to say luxury because it's not a luxury. The offensive line is not a luxury. If you can get an elite offensive lineman that can be here for years and years and years and be that stud, you don't know what Lane Johnson, you don't know Mailata, you don't know Andre Dillard, you don't know Brandon Brooks, you don't know these guys. And yeah, a guard and a tackle, 2 different selections at any point in the draft, especially high. I'm just talking about in terms of this offensive line getting up there in age on the right side and all. It's not a luxury pick. I would understand why they would do it. I just think they have a little bit more time in what they're using now where they can try that later on and maybe help out with an offensive player or a young defensive player as well. That might suit them best for the right now. Depends on their approach, though. If their approach is we are going young, we are retooling, we are rebuilding, it's not about the right now. It's about the long term, and maybe they view that as something that can seriously be a key component for years and years for Jalen Hurts or whoever becomes that quarterback. Joe Flacco, Nate Sudfeld, nah, just kidding. Poor Nate. Poor Nate after that performance against, who did he go in against? Was it the Giants? I don't even want to think about it anymore. Was it Washington? It might have been Washington. I don't know. I don't care. I don't want to think about it. I don't care. With Chase, though, I think I'm leaning Chase the most. I think there's something about Jamar Chase that this dude just balls. It's that easy, simple pick. You can't go wrong with it. It's so hard to mess up 6. I know people are concerned, but it almost feels impossible to mess up 6. You can mess up 16. You can mess up 14. You can mess up a lot of picks in the draft. When you pick that high, there's so many options there, and Chase just seems to be that stud receiver who you saw him play at LSU. You saw him win a year, 2 years ago, I guess at this point. He didn't play last year, and also when he was balling out at LSU, the guy's just dynamic as hell, and he's someone that you can really rely on to be a force and to be something that Nick Sirianni can apply his scheme with and make it really go down with such an unbelievable player that can help stretch out the field. And then you could have Chase, Rager, who I think with time and space can work. This is a guy that you can definitely use your scheme to scheme open and allow him to use that speed to be unreal. How many times did we see that Alshon Jeffrey wide receiver screen for 3 yards? How about you use Quez Watkins, Jalen Rager, John Hightower? I don't know, someone who's got fucking speed, right? Just go out there and use a player like that. That's something that you can do with Rager. Get him open in space. Get him going. Scheme him open. I think having Chase out there, if that's the road they go down, with Dallas Goedert actually running the ball with Miles Sanders. People forget, when you don't run the damn football, all right, guess what? The defense on the other team is going to stack the box. They're going to make it a living hell for you to pass the ball because you're going to pass it 80% of the damn time. Nick Sirianni is coming from an offense where with Frank Reich, you add Marlon Mack, you add Jonathan Taylor, you add running backs that can run the damn football. And that would open up the passing game. That would open up plays for Jalen Hurts. It opens up everything. So with that, if you use Miles Sanders, then you use the play action, and you have Jamar Chase, and you have Dallas Goedert, and you have a healthy offensive line, and you have a solid guy that you can rely on in Greg Ward in the slot. And for people that say, oh, Greg Ward's not good enough and all, and that was me a couple of years ago, when you analyze it and all, and because that was the time of him being a practice squad player, I think he's earned his role. Getting a legit, insane, game-changing slot receiver is not something that's realistic, okay? You don't have game-changing slot receivers. You just have a guy that you can rely on, Mr. Reliable in the slot. That's Greg Ward. I think Nick Sirianni can be creative with that, and it all stems on the offensive line being healthy, though, and that is true. That is 100% legit, and that's what needs to happen. So that's kind of the road I'm at here when it comes to the draft. I would like Chase the most. Pitts, Devontae Smith, I'm cool with all of them. I'm not going to be upset with anything unless they go real out of the box. If they go quarterback, I don't know how I would feel, quite honestly. I was shocked last year when they did it. Wouldn't be as shocked this year, but it does seem like it's hey, you have Jalen. Because then it's like, okay, what'd you just sign Joe Flacco for? Because now it's someone competing with, look, I'm not talking about a 5th, 6th, 7th round project guy. You could probably throw that in as an automatic. I'm talking more about if you're bringing in someone like Justin Fields or Lance or any of these guys, Wilson, that you are thinking about as a future quarterback, then you have Jalen Hurts, you have the new guy, and then you have Joe Flacco making that much money as a third stringer. That would be a joke, right? That would be pathetic. That would be an embarrassment. So, yeah, that would just be stupid. Unless they try and do the good old dual 2-quarterback concept between whoever they drafted 6 and Jalen Hurts. Oh, don't do this to me, because it's a real possibility that they do something so stupid like that. So please tell me that is not the case. I'll leave you with this, because there's one way to look at this Joe Flacco thing with a different set of eyes. If you think about how much you're spending on your 2 quarterbacks, you have Jalen Hurts' contract, and then you apply that with Joe Flacco, and you're spending how? Now, Carson Wentz's dead cap is in play here, so that plays a role in it. But so we know that, though. That's already established. That's part of the salary cap drama that they're in. Let's just look at it from this mindset of the 2 quarterbacks that are on the roster right now. You are barely paying any for 2 quarterbacks. Is that the way that they applied their logic? Go out and sign Joe Flacco, get him in here, and then for our 2 quarterbacks right now, and they'll get a third, they're going to, but this is what we're spending. X amount for the 2 quarterbacks. That's not that bad. They just take it from that broad approach instead of diving a little bit deeper and analyzing more about Joe Flacco, his recent production, his age, and how much he stinks at this point. I guess that didn't really come into play, but regardless, yeah, that's kind of where we are with the Eagles. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone for listening today. I had fun kind of shooting it around a little bit about the Eagles. Did I mention Andrew Adams? He's another name that they picked up as safety. Not really too much of a player, but at this point, you never really know, considering injuries seem to always hurt this team, and roles seem to become bigger as you move forward throughout the season. So a lot happens. So I guess everything's got to be ruled as a possibility, right? But thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Sports Talk with Brodes, and I will see you next time.